Imagine a hidden corner of the internet, a place with no rules, no banks, and no government. A place where you could buy or sell anything you wanted anonymously with just a few clicks. For years, this was the stuff of digital ghost stories, a myth whispered on obscure forums. But in February 2011, the myth became a reality. It was called the Silk Road. And at the heart of this darknet empire was one enigmatic figure, a modern-day folk hero and radical libertarian, known only as Dread Pirate Roberts. The FBI called him a criminal kingpin, the mastermind of a billion-dollar narcotics enterprise. He saw himself as a visionary, building a truly free market to challenge the power of the state. This wasn't just a black market, it was a political statement, an economic experiment taken to its absolute extreme. Today, GENSHIFT is peeling back the layers of this digital mystery. We're going to tell the bizarre true story of the Silk Road, the revolutionary technology that made it possible, the radical ideals that fueled it, and the high-stakes global manhunt that brought down the internet's first darknet emperor. This is the story of how a utopian dream became a criminal nightmare. Get ready to dive into the shadow side of the web. Hit that subscribe button now to join us in decoding the technologies shaping our world. One, the technological foundation, Anarchy by design. To understand the Silk Road, you first have to understand the twin pillars of technology it was built on. These weren't just tools, they were the architectural blueprints for a new kind of anarchy, designed for privacy at a level the world had never seen before. The first pillar was a piece of software with an ironic origin story, Tor. Tor stands for the onion router, and the name is a perfect analogy for how it works. Imagine your internet connection is a message you want to send secretly. Tor takes that message and wraps it in multiple layers of military-grade encryption, just like the layers of an onion. It then sends this encrypted package on a random journey across the globe, bouncing it between at least 3 different volunteer-run computers called nodes or relays. The first computer, the entry node, knows who you are by your IP address, but it can only peel off the first layer of encryption, so it has no idea where your message is ultimately going. It only knows the address of the next stop, the middle node. The middle node is the crucial break in the chain. It only knows that it received the data from the entry node and that it must pass it to the exit node. It doesn't know your identity or your final destination. Finally, the exit node peels off the last layer of encryption and sends your message to the website you want to visit. This node sees the destination, but it has no idea where the request originally came from. And the result? Your digital footprint is effectively erased. The website you visit can't see you, and no single point along the journey knows both who you are and where you're going. Ironically, this powerful privacy tool was originally developed by the US Naval Research Laboratory to protect government intelligence communications online. But by making the software open source and public, they gave the world a key to the hidden internet. Silk Road existed as a special kind of website called a hidden service, with an onion address, meaning not only were the users anonymous, but the server hosting the website was anonymous too. The second pillar was the currency, Bitcoin. In 2011, Bitcoin was a revolutionary and widely misunderstood technology. It was hailed as anonymous digital cash, the perfect untraceable money for a black market. But the truth was far more complicated and, for its users, far more dangerous. Bitcoin isn't truly anonymous, it's pseudonymous. Every single transaction is recorded on a permanent public ledger called the blockchain, visible to anyone in the world. Users are identified not by their real names, but by their Bitcoin addresses, long strings of random-looking characters. For a time, this pseudonymity felt like real anonymity. But the fatal flaw was that if you could ever link a person's real-world identity to just one of their Bitcoin addresses, you could potentially trace their entire financial history on that public ledger. It was a permanent paper trail hiding in plain sight. Together, Tor and Bitcoin created the perfect storm, a hidden, untraceable location combined with what was believed to be untraceable money. It was the technological foundation for an empire built in the shadows. 2. CC, Economics and Philosophy of Silk Road. The Silk Road wasn't just a website. It was a radical political and economic experiment. Its founder, Ulbricht, operating under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, was more than a site administrator. He positioned himself as a philosopher king, crafting his digital domain around a strict set of libertarian ideals. On his public LinkedIn profile, Ulbricht declared that he wanted to use economic theory as a means to abolish the use of coercion and aggression amongst mankind. The Silk Road was to be his economic simulation, a living demonstration of radical libertarianism in action. In forum posts, DPR outlined his vision. The Silk Road was founded on libertarian principles and regulated by market forces, not a central power. He championed agorism, the belief in creating a parallel, voluntary economy that operates entirely outside of state control. To him, every transaction, especially every drug deal, was a victory against what he saw as the thieving, murderous myths of the state. But an anonymous market faces a fundamental challenge: trust. How do you buy from a stranger you can't see, using money you can't trace, and still expect to receive what you paid for? Ulbricht's answer was both clever and ironic. To build a stateless society, he had to create a microstate. Borrowing features from legitimate e-commerce giants like Amazon and eBay, he developed a sophisticated private governance system. The foundation was a centralized escrow system. When a buyer made a purchase, their Bitcoin went to Silk Road, not the seller, until the buyer confirmed receipt of the goods. Only then were the funds released to the vendor, minus the site's commission. This made DPR both the central banker and the chief justice of his marketplace. To enhance trust further, he introduced a public vendor rating and feedback system. Buyers could post reviews, fostering a reputation economy where reliable vendors prospered and scammers were eliminated. This community-enforced accountability became the law of the land. Ironically, in trying to create a rule-free world, Ulbricht became its ruler, writing terms of service, resolving disputes, and enforcing his own vision. This revealed a deep paradox. For a truly free market to function, it still requires rules, trust, and enforcement, the very institutions it aims to avoid. Over time, this contradiction pushed Ulbricht toward darker, more coercive measures to protect his empire. His self-image as a revolutionary leader, combined with overconfidence in his moral judgment and technical security, created the blind spots that would ultimately lead to his downfall. 3. The Manhunt. Unmasking the Dread Pirate. While Dread Pirate Roberts was busy constructing his libertarian utopia, a multi-agency task force, composed of agents from the FBI, DEA, and IRS, was quietly orchestrating one of the most complex digital manhunts in history. For 2 years, DPR appeared untouchable, a phantom shielded by the seemingly impenetrable anonymity of Tor. Yet his fortress was eventually breached not through technological breakthrough, but through patient, methodical, old-fashioned detective work that exploited human error. The first clue was a pseudonym, Altoid. In January 2011, a user with that handle made one of the earliest public posts promoting Silk Road on a forum dedicated to magic mushroom enthusiasts. At first glance, it was a trivial breadcrumb. But months later, IRS criminal investigator Gary Alford, combing through the internet for any trace of Silk Road's origins, stumbled upon another post by Altoid, this time on the popular programming Quanda site Stack Overflow. In that post, the user asked for technical assistance in connecting to a Tor hidden service, and then came the catastrophic operational security lapse. He signed off with his real email address, rossobrichtigmail.com. It was the Rosetta Stone investigators had been searching for, the single thread tying the anonymous Silk Road promoter to a real-world identity. With a name, the net began to tighten. Agents uncovered more evidence. Ulbricht had ordered fake driver's licenses, intended for setting up servers, to his San Francisco apartment. Logs from the Silk Road servers revealed that DPR's online activity closely matched the waking hours of someone living in the Pacific time zone. The ghost in the machine was starting to take human form. The next major breakthrough came when the FBI located the Silk Road's physical server. According to the official account, they discovered it through what they called a leaky CAPTCHA. The claim was that the CAPTCHA on the login page had been misconfigured, causing it to communicate over the normal internet rather than exclusively through Tor, thus revealing the true IP address, located in Iceland. However, this explanation has been heavily disputed. Ulbricht's defense team and several security experts argued that the site's configuration files made such a leak impossible. This has fueled speculation that the FBI may have used a classified surveillance method, possibly involving the NSA, and invented the CAPTCHA story as a form of parallel construction, a legal tactic to conceal the real investigative source. Meanwhile, law enforcement had been infiltrating the Silk Road from the inside. Undercover agents posed as major drug suppliers, establishing direct lines of communication with DPR and winning his trust. In an ironic twist, one DEA agent, Carl Force, went rogue. He used his undercover identity to extort hundreds of thousands of dollars from Ulbricht while simultaneously selling him fake insider tips about the ongoing investigation. By the fall of 2013, the trap was nearly closed. On October 1st, a team of FBI agents tracked Ross Ulbricht to the Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library. They needed more than proof of his identity. They needed to catch him actively logged into the Silk Road's administrative backend. The obstacle was his laptop's encryption, which could be triggered the instant he shut the lid. The agents devised a distraction. Two operatives, a man and a woman, staged a loud argument nearby. As Ulbricht turned to look, another agent swiftly snatched the open laptop from his desk. The contents were damning. Inside was a personal diary chronicling the Silk Road's creation, chat logs with his core staff, and a detailed spreadsheet recording over $80 million in commissions. The carefully guarded anonymity of the dread pirate Roberts had finally been pierced. Bohr, the legacy, freedom, anonymity, and responsibility. The arrest of Ross Ulbricht and the October 2013 seizure of Silk Road was celebrated as a decisive win in the fight against cybercrime. Yet, it had an unintended and paradoxical consequence. It strengthened the very Darknet ecosystem it sought to destroy. This reaction is often referred to as the Hydra effect. Remove one head, and multiple others emerge. With Silk Road's dominant position gone, a power vacuum quickly formed. Within weeks, dozens of replacement markets appeared. Silk Road 2.0, Agora, Evolution, and more, fragmenting the landscape. Law enforcement could no longer cripple the entire industry by eliminating a single site. Even more transformative was the shift in security architecture. The FBI's seizure of Silk Road's centralized escrow wallet, which contained millions in user funds, was a critical blow to trust in that model. This loss spurred a wave of innovation. The next generation of markets adopted multi-signature escrow systems, where 2 of 3 keys, held by the buyer, seller, and market, were needed to release funds. This made it far harder for administrators to steal or for law enforcement to seize money in bulk. In addition, PGP encryption for all communications became mandatory, ensuring that even if servers were compromised, message content would remain secure. Some platforms even integrated Bitcoin tumblers directly into their systems, obfuscating transaction trails on the blockchain. By attempting to end the Darknet market era, law enforcement had inadvertently catalyzed its evolution, pushing it toward greater decentralization, stronger encryption, and hardened operational security. The legacy of the Silk Road is a tangled, ongoing struggle that still resonates in the digital age. It stands as the definitive case study in both the potential and the peril of decentralization. On one hand, it proved that technology can enable a global, functioning marketplace entirely outside the reach of state control. On the other, it exposed how a noble vision for freedom can be twisted into a platform for crime, and how even the fiercest anti-authoritarian can end up recreating the very hierarchies they aimed to dismantle. For Gen Z, who have grown up amid constant debates over online privacy, government censorship, and corporate surveillance, the Silk Road story is more relevant than ever. It forces us to grapple with uncomfortable, timeless questions. How much liberty are we willing to risk for the sake of security? How do we balance anonymity with accountability? There are no clean, universally acceptable answers. The tensions the Silk Road brought into sharp focus over a decade ago still shape our conversations, policies, and innovations today, continuing to define the trajectory of our digital future. Conclusion. The rise and fall of the Silk Road is more than just a digital true crime saga. It's a sharp reminder that technology is never neutral. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It mirrors the values, ambitions, and flaws of those who create and use it. Ross Ulbricht envisioned a digital utopia rooted in absolute freedom, yet the world he built became an empire of illicit trade, and he became its conflicted, fallen ruler. This story pushes us toward a difficult, timeless question. In a world where technology can enable systems completely free from oversight, where should the line be drawn between liberty and law? And perhaps even more crucial, who gets to decide? The debates once confined to the Darknet's hidden corners have now spilled into public view, influencing conversations around cryptocurrency, social media, and digital governance. So what is the right balance between privacy and protection? That's a question we'll be wrestling with for decades to come. If you found this investigation valuable, share it with someone who should see it, and subscribe to GenShift for more deep dives into the technologies shaping our reality.